my lovely learners of the English language, and welcome to another episode in the Class Clown series, IELTS edition. Behind the camera, we have Sina, the producer.
Hello!
Your host, Sarah. And joining us today is Sam from Fast Track ESL, who is also an expert in the IELTS industry. Hello.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having me.
No problem.
So, Sarah, you ready for another flipped IELTS interview?
Yes, I am.
All right, let's do this. Let's not waste any time.
Okay.
Now let's get down to it. Okay. Now, in this first part, I want to ask you a few questions about yourself, Sarah. What's your ideal job 10 years from now? Where do you see yourself?
My ideal job 10 years from now would be an interior designer. If you knew me very well, you might be still surprised, because I usually talk about my love for acting, but interior design is one of my passions also. So yes, I would say in 10 years, I would like to get more into interior design.
Interesting. Now, how useful will English be to non-native speakers in the future?
I think that it'll be just as important, if not more important, in the future, because just a little while back it was the only super central language in the world, and it continues to grow in popularity and demand as more industries and already existing politics, technology, science is largely based in the English language. So yes, it will continue to grow in popularity.
Okay. And how much traveling do you plan to do in the future?
I plan to do a lot of traveling in the future because I love travel, and transportation is becoming even more people-friendly with prices and routes to different destinations.
What's your favorite means of transportation?
I would say the train, in particular the Via Rail, because it offers very picturesque and scenic views as you travel along their routes.
Interesting. And in the future, how much do you think your life will change?
That is quite a general question, but based on my recent years of life, I would say that it will continue to change greatly because I like to experiment and try new things.
Okay. And how do you generally feel about change?
I feel very flexible towards change. As I've done it before, I continue to do it, even though I've made a few attempts to settle down. It hasn't stuck, so I'm opening my arms and embracing change.
Okay. Wonderful. Now, in this second part, I'm going to give you a cue card.
Okay.
On this card, there are some questions. I want you to think about the questions for 1 minute, and then you have to speak for 2 minutes.
Okay.
Here's the card. I want you to talk about a book that you loved reading because it made you think a lot. You have 1 minute.
Okay. All right, so the book I'm picking is The Perfect Scent. It's a passion, technical and business heavy. Why you just read it? General interest.
And that's 1 minute.
Good.
There
Okay.
it is.
Pens down. All right.
Okay. You have 2 minutes. Please continue speaking until I tell you to stop, and don't worry if I stop you.
Okay. So I would love to talk about a book that I loved reading because it made me think a lot. And that book is The Perfect Scent by Chandler Burr. I'm not sure if you read it, but it became quite popular after its publication. And a reason why I think it was popular or became popular is because it was tracking the process of Sarah Jessica Parker, who is a famous actress and is well known for her TV series. And then it was also following an Italian perfumer. And they had a similar mission, and that was to use green mango as the inspiration for their new fragrance. And I am a lover of fragrances from the time I was a teenager, so I thought this book would be a great read for me, but also challenging because I don't know much about the perfume industry. And that is a part of why I chose to read it, because, you know, it's one thing to be passionate and be a fan of fragrances, but to know the more technical side is something I wanted to do. And it made me think more about the business side of the industry and the more scientific side of the industry. So for a curious mind of fragrances, I think I hit the right source. And I'm also interested in the history of fragrances, as in the fact that men and women used to wear the same fragrance. It wasn't gendered before like it is today, and makes me wonder about the future of fragrances as well. On another note, there's cologne. You know, it's not exactly another note, but a similar note. Men's fragrances are usually stronger, but I feel like there's so much crossover in identity and fragrance, so that could possibly be another avenue of thought to pursue.
Thank you. Okay.
All right.
Now, you talked about a book
Yes,
that you
I did.
enjoyed reading.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in this third part, I'd like to ask you a few more general questions.
Okay.
Now, what are the most appealing children's books in your country?
That's a wonderful question, actually, because I have nieces and nephews that I read books to, so I can actually answer this question pretty well. Robert Munsch is still a favorite among children these days, so I would say he's popular. Books that are based on characters of TV shows and movies that children see in media, that's also very popular. Need I mention Frozen? No, I don't need to mention it because it's popular. And Dr. Seuss is a classic that people will always love, adults and children alike.
Okay. Do you think it's better to allow children to pick the books they want to read, or should parents choose it for them?
I mean, as long as the books are child-friendly, you know, like the topics are child-friendly, I think the children should be able to gravitate towards what attracts them naturally. And it could be a mix, a balance of both, you know. Parents pick and the children pick.
Okay. Now, are electronic books popular in your country? E-books?
Are ebooks popular? Personally, from my experience, I'm going to say no. I tried reading a few ebooks, but it didn't stick because I'm one of those people that like the feel and the smell of books, like that traditional feel. But I would say for other people, I don't see people reading ebooks that often.
Okay. And do you believe ebooks will completely replace printed books one day?
I'm going to say no, because I'm one of those people who believe that technology is fallible, right? Like, there might be a day when the internet just drops and we're like, what do we do? You know, we could, and then if we completely eliminate all the books in the world and then we can't access ebooks, well, what are we going to do then? Is my question to you, if
No.
I'm allowed to ask you questions.
Well, unfortunately not.
Okay.
But
all right.
this is the end of the IELTS speaking test.
Thank you.
Clap, clap, clap.
And scene.
All right.
All right.
Another 9 in the bag, right, Sam?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely. If not a 10.
If not a 10.
Yeah. Oh boy. Oh boy.
So, what did you think?
I actually had a lot of fun doing this one, but maybe that can be detrimental in an actual IELTS interview.
Why is that?
At least as a native speaker, I became a little too conversational and I might have forgotten the purpose of the question you were asking.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that happened more in part 3 than in the other parts, but...
That does tend to happen when people are engaged.
Yes.
And they're genuinely interested in what they're saying. And they sometimes forget that they're taking an interview, an IELTS interview, and they have to curb that enthusiasm.
Curb the enthusiasm!
That's right.
Like
okay.
the series, yeah.
I have a few comments to share with you. Would you like to hear them?
I would love to hear them.
All right.
I love compliments. Okay.
Okay. Oh, rest assured. Rest assured, they're going to be all yes.
Okay.
So in part 1, the second question I asked wasn't related to you. So I said, how useful will English be to non-native speakers?
Yes.
But you went with it.
Okay.
You didn't stop to say, "Hey, but I'm not a non-native speaker." You just went with it, and that does happen on the real test. Occasionally, students do get that question that really doesn't
Apply to them.
Yes, it doesn't fit who they are. It doesn't apply to them. And they stop. My advice is just roll with it, just like what Sarah did, and so that was really amazing.
Yes.
In part 2, I noticed that you explained a little bit of the plot. And that's something that I always tell my students to avoid.
Yes.
So if you're talking about a movie, talk about everything about that movie except the plot. And the reason is, it's a little bit more challenging to describe all the details and nuances of and the intricacies of a plot.
Yes.
So I always tell my students, keep that off the table. But then you did it, but I still did notice that at times you were maybe struggling a little bit because there's so much information. And,
that is true.
And the plot can't just be simplified in a few sentences.
Yeah.
So that was something that is... Did you know, and little known fact, we have a type of intelligence called narrative intelligence.
Yes. I didn't know that.
You didn't know that. You know, at least you're pretending you didn't know that, which is, thank you, I appreciate that. So people have different, are different in terms of how much narrative intelligence they have. Some people are very good at storytelling, other people are not. And when it's a struggle for people in their own native language to tell stories, then you can only imagine how difficult it might be for someone who's speaking English as a second or a foreign language.
Absolutely.
So steer clear.
Steer clear, my dear.
I also liked how you improvised. There was a point towards the end where you pretty much wrapped everything up. You were done, right?
Yeah.
But then since I didn't stop you, you continued. And this is something that I always tell my students.
Crucial.
Don't stop until the examiner stops you.
Yeah.
If the examiner doesn't say anything, just keep going, and you gotta assume that the 2 minutes isn't up, even if you think it is.
Yeah.
So I like what Sarah did there.
Right.
Well done.
Thanks.
Okay. Guys, before we wrap up this episode, I have a question for Sam. Could you do us a favor and tell our students what specifically they need to focus on when preparing for the IELTS speaking test? I am pretty sure that students know grammar is important,
Right.
vocabulary is important,
Right.
pronunciation is important. But I want you to, if possible, categorize the criteria and tell us a little bit about what they need to specifically focus on.
That's a very good question. So, the band descriptors break down speaking performance into 4 criteria. These are fluency, grammatical range and accuracy, lexical resource or the vocabulary that you use, and finally pronunciation. Now, my advice to students is you gotta know what you're aiming for. So preparation does tend to vary depending on the score that you're aiming for and how much time you have at your disposal. How much time do you have to prepare? If you have a month or maybe less, I don't recommend working too much on grammar or even perhaps vocabulary. Just feel comfortable with the test. Make sure that you simulate exam conditions with someone who knows the test and can give you correct feedback and good advice. And so as long as you simulate and as long as you guarantee that you feel comfortable on the day of the test and you know what you're doing at each part, in each part of the test, then I think that's the smartest way to prepare.
Practice, practice, practice. That's not just a saying. It is the most important thing you could do.
And
Practice,
actually,
practice.
As someone who was a speaking examiner, before that I did teach some IELTS, but before that I'm looking back to the teacher that I was, and if someone asked me for IELTS help, in all fairness and to be fair to the student, I would say you need an IELTS instructor, someone who's familiar with the test, because I could teach you English, but that doesn't mean I know about the specific timing and the task.
100%.
You know, so try to aim for someone who knows about the test and has experience with it.
Great. And watch these episodes.
That too. This is the best resource, guys. All right.
All right.
So we're wrapping it up.
Yes, please.
Everyone have a beautiful day, and we'll see you again for another episode. If there are any words you've seen on the screen and you don't know what they mean, look down to the descriptions box below, and then you'll know.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Happy learning, guys.
Happy learning.